So, a while ago I made a video all about the perception of Chi-Chi, and it was a pretty low performing video. But over the course of the last 2 months, it slowly crept up to being one of the best performing videos on the channel. That had me thinking, there's another Dragon Ball girl who we need to talk about. That of course being Videl. Generally, Chi-Chi was a well-liked character, but perception of her soured as the story went on. Videl was similarly pretty well-liked, and while I wouldn't say people grew to dislike her, later material certainly did not do this character justice. So, I want to dive in and find out what happened. Before we press on, Videl is trying to focus her energy, but she's too busy worrying about my channel's growth. If you subscribe to the channel, she won't need to worry and can get back to her training. So, unlike Chi-Chi, who was introduced in the first arc of the story, Videl only showed up in the final arc, that being the Buu Saga. Now, I would argue, while Videl showed up late, I'm pretty sure she gets more screen time in this one arc than Chi-Chi got in the entire manga. Our first encounter with Videl is right after the time skip. She seems to be the city's defender, but before she can take out some criminals, a mysterious golden-haired fighter beat her to the crime scene. She learned that the golden fighter goes to her school, so this sets up her subplot of trying to figure out who they are. Of course, we know the golden fighter is Gohan. We also learn pretty early on that Videl is in fact the daughter of the great Mr. Satan, which, when you really think about it, Videl being a real hero and Mr. Satan's daughter is absolute peak comedy. I don't know how Toriyama does it. Speaking of peak comedy, the entire school life section is golden, from Gohan's baseball game to everyone thinking his superhero routine is lame. Videl is a pretty clever lass, so she tricks Gohan into outing himself in their first encounter. If you're an anime-only watcher, that might surprise you, as they added a few filler episodes in here, including that scene. In the filler, Gohan eludes her several times before their only real encounter from the manga. After outing him, she blackmails him into entering the next Tenkaichi Budokai. She wants him to enter, as it seems like in modern times there's no one who can give her a good challenge, and she offhandedly asks him to teach her how to fly. So, let's stop for a sec here and go over Videl's character. She's a defender of justice and quite smart as she sleuths out everything about Gohan with ease. She's a passionate fighter, wanting Gohan to enter the tournament as she wants a real challenge, and less importantly, she's rich. Considering who the audience for this manga is, no wonder there's so many people that love Videl. She's practically every Dragon Ball fan's dream girl, and that's nowhere near the end of her involvement in this arc. After that, Gohan trains with Goten for the tournament, but Videl shows up unannounced for their previously agreed upon flight lessons. It's also here that we start to set up Gohan and Videl's future relationship, but in classic Toriyama fashion, it's only ever referenced in the form of comedy. This scene is one of my favorite from the story, as it's essentially the only time we get any kind of explanation about Ki and how it works, and Videl is a good audience stand-in for Gohan to explain all of this to. Now, while writing this part of the script, I put out a poll asking you guys what Videl's best hairstyle is, and here are the results. Personally, I'm a short hair fan, so I'm curious if you guys agree with me or not. After that, we get the setup that Videl herself also believes Mr. Satan is the strongest, and we kinda see that he basically doesn't train anymore, fully embracing the facade, which is interesting, as he really was the world champion back in the day, so I guess he's let the fame get to his head. As we get into the tournament, Videl slowly realizes how powerful our characters actually are, as we see them at the punching machine, and then Goten and Trunks' big fight, until finally... darn, I guess I gotta talk about this. I think generally, Toriyama has done a fantastic job setting up Videl as a likable character. That's why it's so brutal that he has her get savagely beaten down by Spopovich, to really kick off the actual plot of this arc. It really says a lot about her, that she refuses to give up, even in such a brutal fight. She really was a true fighter. And again, this really sets the tone, getting us into the more serious plot of the Buu Saga. After that, Gohan is furious and brings her to the infirmary. There's this idea that gets brought up several times, that Mr. Satan won't let Videl date a guy who's weaker than him, which in her eyes basically means no one. But for us as the audience, it's a fun little in-joke, as we know Gohan is in fact much stronger than her father. And soon after that, we get what is essentially the conclusion to Gohan and Videl's arc, as she confirms with Gohan that it was him that killed Cell, and not her father, and in her last appearance for a while, she says if Gohan survives, she'll go out with him. A big thing that I think Videl adds to the story is how Gohan never got any sort of credit for all the achievements he made in the past. It's really nice for Gohan to get some recognition for all the stuff he's done. In the form of Videl, And with that, we really dive into the main plot with Babidi. After a while, we get another scene showing Videl's connection to Gohan, where everyone thinks Gohan is dead, but Videl had a feeling that he's still alive somehow, and of course, us the readers know she's right. After that, her time in the story is basically done. Her father gets to become part of the main cast as well. It's pretty impressive how Toriyama took a gag character like Mr. Satan and not only integrated him into the cast, but basically made him the heart of the story. The story wouldn't be the same without him and his daughter. After that, we jump into the end of Z timeskip. Videl and Gohan got married, and also had a daughter in Pan, who you might think takes after Goku, but really, if you think about it, she actually takes after her mother, who shares Goku's passion for combat. Now, that's it for the main story, but Videl actually gets a lot of love in the Dragon Ball side projects, most notably in Broly's Second Coming and Wrath of the Dragon. During Broly's Second Coming, our main cast is Goten, Trunks, and Videl, and their dynamic is pretty great. Funnily enough, this movie is generally considered pretty bad, but the best parts of it are our characters interacting with each other while collecting the Dragon Balls. In fact, at first it seems like Videl is the main character of this movie, but she quickly ends up getting thrown away for Broly to hog the spotlight. It's really a shame that we had to shoehorn Broly into this plot. Imagine if this was a more down-to-earth plot that didn't end up boiling down to kill the big evil man, and instead was a more complicated plot involving the people of the village. Maybe they could have introduced a low-powered opponent and somehow set up a situation where Videl got to have her own fight. It makes me sad, because I feel like they were so close to making a good movie here. Similarly, the next movie, Bio Broly, falls into the exact same pitfall of having a pretty interesting premise, but Broly comes along to ruin it. But Videl isn't even in that one. But I bring it up because it seemed to me that the movie writers kept getting close to producing a good movie, but kept fumbling the bag, until finally we abandon Broly, and instantly we start making banger movies, with Fusion Reborn, and the other movie we need to discuss in this video, Wrath of the Dragon. While she isn't a main character in this movie, it's where we get to see her as the Great Saiyaman 2, which I think is a fantastic continuation of her character, as her and Gohan are now going out, so she's playing along with his superhero shenanigans, despite thinking it was lame the first time she saw it. It really fits though, as they were both already acting as heroes individually before this, so they end up making a great couple. Something I like about Videl is how she doesn't just feel like the girl Toriyama included to be Gohan's future wife, and was a genuinely important driving force for the plot, and had her own interests that ultimately aligned with Gohan, making them a believable couple. Also, it's wild that they go to stop a guy from committing suicide, and Videl basically hits him with the, "Do it, you won't." And finally, we get a scene with Bulma and Videl doing the dishes. In the movie, this scene exists as a frame for Bulma to talk about Tapion. But if you think about it, this is literally the two richest women on the planet doing dishes together, which is kinda wild, as you would assume they'd have other people to do that for them. Okay, finally done with Dragon Ball Z. Right after that, we get straight into GT, and of course, Videl herself isn't super involved, but she is present in spirit, as her daughter is a main member of the cast, and people might get mad at me for saying this, but they really are similar in terms of personality. Outside of Pan, we get an interesting scene where Videl and Gohan are about to kill Pan while under Baby's control, but interestingly enough, they seem to retain some of their good side, as despite Baby telling them to kill her, they still say they want to plead with Baby to spare her. We also get a pretty funny B-plot during Goku's fight with Super 17, where Videl and Chi-Chi get ready to help fight off the villains from Hell, and that's it for GT. All in all, Videl is a pretty great inclusion in the Dragon Ball what's that? Videl appears in something else? Do we have to? Okay. Let's finally get into Videl's transformation from an interesting character to a generic
anime waifu.
So, I really like Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods. Like, a lot. Like, it might be my favorite Dragon Ball thing, period. However, there is one glaring issue. That, of course, being the downfall of Videl. So, generally she's a plot device in the movie, but her personality is nowhere to be found. The idea that her unborn child can be the last Saiyan for the God ritual is really interesting, and Gohan finding out he's going to be a father is a great scene. The big issue here is of course Videl's war crime of a redesign for this movie. As I mentioned earlier, I did a Videl hairstyle poll, and in the comments I mentioned there wasn't a correct choice, but there is a wrong one. This in particular being the wrong choice. So let's get into character design. So, what do we know about Videl? She's not really a girly girl. She's a sporty tomboy type character, and all of her designs before this complement that idea. She wears baggy shirts and tights for optimal mobility, and fingerless gloves for fighting. Here, in Super, we've abandoned all of that, and she is the spitting image of a generic
Anime waifu.
the ideal Japanese girl, fashionable, polite, and on the quiet side. All things Videl isn't. This character isn't Videl. All of her personality is gone. We don't get a single snarky comment from her for the entirety of Super. And it's not that surprising, as it's well documented that Toriyama completely removed Dragon Ball from his mind as soon as he was done the manga, even forgetting extremely important plot points like Super Saiyan 2. Toriyama redesigned all of the characters for this movie, and unfortunately, it seems like all of the thought Toriyama gave Videl here was, oh, her name is a pun on devil, I'll put a little devil on her dress. But, you know, her involvement is rather limited in this movie. What about after that? Well, it doesn't get better. She continues to be a generic
Anime waifu.
for all of Super. She's quiet, polite, and never acts aggressive in any way, wearing these cutesy outfits that generally look fine, but are completely out of character for Videl. Remember when she told that guy he should kill himself? Alright, I'm being a little disingenuous. There are two specific scenes we should go over. First being the Great Saiyan Man filler arc, where we see Videl is irritated by this actor hitting on her, but like, again, she reacts in the most generic
Anime waifu.
way possible, being super passive-aggressive and calm. The real Videl would have socked this guy in the face and then said she made him look better. Then, we get this other girl who is into Gohan and sneaks a kiss on him. And that is followed by the same guy showing a photo of it to Videl, but because she trusts Gohan, she doesn't care, which is a good character moment, except like, this is Son Gohan we're talking about. Of course this nerd isn't out cheating on his wife. She would have to be stupid to believe that. But at least she finally tells this guy off. The only thing that would have made it better is if Videl was the one to physically kick him out instead of Gohan. Then, he comes back with some alien possession shenanigans and kidnaps her daughter. Of course, Videl herself is useless, and Gohan needs to save the day. At least they actually remembered Videl knows how to fly. It's just so sad to me that such a beloved character from Dragon Ball Z is basically a shell of her former self. It would have been so much more interesting if Videl and Gohan continue to be superheroes in their spare time, instead of Videl being reduced to Gohan's wife. And in general, I do think part of this is also due to how Gohan himself gets massively sidelined in Super as well, himself becoming business conference nerd husband. This guy was basically the main character for all of Dragon Ball Z, and Super just refused to involve him for years. Well, that did end up changing near the end here. We finally make Gohan relevant again in the superhero movie, and we do, for the first time in Super, learn that Videl actually has hobbies outside of being a generic
Anime waifu.
as she apparently teaches martial arts classes in her father's dojo, which makes sense, as she was a contender for the strongest human in the world outside of the Z Fighters. And we even get to see her class during the recent bonus manga chapter, so at the very least, good job on Super for putting in the bare minimum, eventually. Oh, and don't get me started on Daima. Not only is Gohan not present for the entire plot of Daima, but Videl didn't even make it into the Z Fighter family photo. Her father is here, but not her. The disrespect is insane. Okay, that's it for the Videl video. Moral of the story, Videl was great, fantastic character, and Super kinda sucks. Well, I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you next time.